so let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. Why do we kill everything in D&D? We're going to answer that question, and then we're going to give you some ways to make it so that you can still kill whatever you want, but it will be one tool out of a few that you have. So the topic came about because I'm playtesting an RPG that we're writing with my daughter, who is 6, and she has never played Dungeons and Dragons. And I realized when I was placing these little monsters in front of her that I was the one who was encouraging her to attack it, right? And this was illuminated to me when she made the suggestion that was something totally unrelated to combat. And I thought, oh no, not only am I like making an RPG that is skewing towards, that same sort of mindless mechanic, but it really illuminated to me, well, wait, why do we kill everything in D&D? And can there be a different way? And so I was going to actually throw it to you, Jeff, because I think you have a really good answer. Jeff, why do we kill everything in D&D? So we love combat. We know it's a huge part of D&D, so we're definitely not trying to dunk on combat or remove it, but sometimes we forget the other two pillars of the game, which are role-playing and exploration. This is ways to explore that. We still love us some combat, so bear that in mind as you watch the video.
So I think there's two main reasons why that play pattern is so common in D&D. Just the kill things, take its loot pattern of anytime you see something that's not like a human person, like the immediate gut feeling is like, we need to kill this thing before it kills us, and maybe it'll have valuable stuff. One of it, I think, is people just, I think, take a lot of influence from video games, where that's sort of the only option of a play pattern is like, the game is designed that the monsters will attack you. There's no way to talk to them in the game, so the only thing you can do is kill them. And then people take that play loop basically from games and feel like in D&D they have to do the same thing. But I think the biggest culprit of them all is D&D rules themselves. Because if you look at the way that D&D is written as a game, the mechanics, you can tell a lot about what a game wants you to do by what the rules give you options to do. And if you look at your 5e character sheet, you'll notice something, which is that almost all the abilities on there are combat related. So, you have action surges and fireballs and all these things like that. And there's some support for things like, there's a persuasion skill, so you can roll that and you might succeed or not. But the level of depth that goes into I pass or failed this persuasion rule versus the depth of an entire 5e combat, you can see very clearly how much the rules are slanted towards exploring combat. I think it can be difficult then to pull people out of that space of well, I've made this wizard. I have all these cool spells that deal damage to people. Of course I want to use my cool fireball spells and my lightning bolt spells. And there's not really a great way to look and see oh, my character is really great at talking to people, other than oh, I get advantage on persuasion checks sometimes, and it's that's so much less engaging in terms of the game that you're playing than rolling initiative and all these spells and making decisions and action surges and all these different things. So the rules definitely don't do that mindset any favors, which is unfortunate.
So we feel like we've identified the why. Now we have some ideas as to how you can change this at your table. First, I'm going to throw it to James, and then we're going to give you some ideas of how you can actually change D&D simply, but make it a lot more diverse and flexible. So James, give me a couple of things that you think we could do to shift this mindset so that it's not kill, 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 kill.
So a few simple things you can do. They're actually going to be attacking at what I think is part of the problem of the mindset, right? Jeff mentioned whether you have a lot of combat abilities, so your first blush is combat a lot of the time. The first decision you want to make is combat, right? One of the important things, though, is if your GM or your group decides they want to talk to more people, that can be difficult because in D&D, combat is based on like who sees who first and everything. And so there's always a little bit of a standoff when you see somebody. And I think I just sort of want to come out and say, I want to give people permission to say, hey, these creatures are hostile or these aren't. Jeff mentioned in the video game, the creatures attack you. It tells you, hey, there's no other option here. I'm going to bite you to death unless you kill me. Just remove that where you just, to help that mindset. Just tell the players, hey, this person's hostile. You're going to want to sneak up on them. You know that. Or, hey, they look like they might be friendly. You know what I mean? Just the GM's not going to trick you. You want to play the story. Another thing to make it potentially a little more narrative is to work in something that I've seen called the panic threshold, where as a GM, you just tell your players, hey, at a certain level, of HP, this creature is going to run away. Say you're fighting a creature, that is just a bear that wandered into town, that maybe one of the players doesn't want to kill, but everybody wants to get XP for it. Well, if you run the bear off, you get the same amount of XP, right? There's this panic threshold that just simply, those two things will change the mindsets of players and in effect, give them more decisions, not necessarily mechanically like a fireball spell, but they can say, hey, okay, when it starts running away, we want to trap it and heal it. Totally new storyline that you don't get if you're like, all right, you kill the bear, what next, So I think even just the beginning of shifting the mindset with those little things could help some groups with that.
Yeah, and a quick variant of one of the things you suggested that popped into my head was make it so that when things hit 0 hit points, they're automatically unconscious rather than dead. That's another way to kind of put it into the game so that people can then decide because, just again, options.
Yeah, so as far as kind of other ways to try to, I think, break this mindset, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One, just an alternate mindset that you can take, and another, a mechanical way to try to kind of explore some other options within D&D. But I think the first one, just something that we've said on this channel a lot, and I'll continue to say it many, many times, the old faithful of, if you're a GM and you're running a game and you keep trying to put in like people to talk to, monsters that aren't necessarily ambiguously hostile and evil, and your players just keep killing and taking, you can't always just have a conversation with them about that. This is the easiest, I think, way, in life, honestly, but in RPG specifically, of like, if there's a way that you'd like the game to go differently, ask the people who are there to attempt to doing it differently. Knowing that not everyone's going to be into it all the time, knowing that they won't get it perfectly the first try, to just simply, go to the table and say, hey, we're doing a lot of killing, a lot of looting, and that's fun, and we're going to keep that in there. But it'd be really cool, I think, if some of these NPCs, that have clearly some thought process that you can communicate with, if you found other ways to deal with them than, just jumping straight to combat. Like, try having a conversation with them, see if you can convince them to switch to your side. However you want to go about it, just know that there are other options, and if you want to explore those other options, I, as the GM, will be happy to take you up on that and to help assist that and to make that a part of the game. And I'm not going to like surprise attack you when you try to talk to the NPC or, anything like that. Like, in good faith, like, let's try to see if you guys want to take some other options here. And sometimes that can just be enough, just to give them permission of like, hey, like, you can, befriend people. You can get them to flee, to run away. You don't have to just go straight to murder every time. And it would be cool if you tried some of those things out. Just saying that, can sometimes be the thing that does it. And then all that to say, as I said before, the mechanics of D&D don't support other forms of problem solving nearly as well. So there's always the option of trying to add in some variant rules as the GM. I don't have anything like formally written out to do this, so I'm just going to be kind of spitballing, but it might be enough to kind of get something started. Which is to basically, there's a game that I love called Heart. It's an RPG system as well. And one of the things that Heart does really well is that there are different tracks of hit points for like different tasks. So yeah, a monster will have a certain amount of hit points that you'll need to deal to it to kill it, if you're fighting. And again, as Tim said, I love me a good combat. I'm not trying to get combat out of the game. Like, I love me some fights, but there are some other great things you can explore in role-playing games too. But one of the cool things that it does is it has a mechanic for delving, which is basically going down further into the heart, which is this kind of like crazy super dungeon style thing. I won't get too into the specifics. But, you know, in a D&D game, that would probably just be like, well, we're going from this town to that town. You would just kind of go. You know, there's not really a whole lot to work with there. You might do an athletics check to get over the rickety bridge or whatever, you know, but that might be it. But in Heart, you basically roll your skills like normal, but you'll have a dice that'll deal basically like damage to the delve. So you'll have basically a damage die for your attacks. You also have a damage die for your delve. So, and there will be like a hit point track basically for the delve of like, once the delve takes 10 damage, you've made it to the place that you're trying to get to. You know, once you've dealt 10 social stress to this NPC, you convince them to do what you ask them to do, you know, however it is that you want to, however it is that it works, you know, for the different situations. And you have dice that deal damage basically appropriately to those things. And I think it'd be very easy to do something like that in 5e, which is like, I don't know exactly how the mechanics would shake out, like if the die size would be based off of your ability score and proficiency or something like that. But basically have damage dice, quote unquote, for social situations or exploration situations if you want people to sort of engage in that and say like, hey, you don't have to like role play out some grand speech, but like if you're trying to talk to this guy, let's talk to him instead of killing him. So, all right, roll a persuasion check. You hit, so roll a d8, you know, and you do 7 damage to his, you know, social hit points. And once you get him to 0, you know, then you'll have convinced him to do what you're asking him to do. And if you could even go the extra mile of like making class abilities that interact with those systems, that's a whole design thing. So that might not be a situation that's for everybody to like sort of invent an entire, you know, extra system to put into D&D. But if you're looking for ways to tinker around and you like homebrewing rules, that's a way that you might be able to do it as well, is to start looking and giving basically damage dice for non-combat situations and hit points to those situations, and have players be able to like engage properly with the rules of the game in that way too.
And something else you can do is kind of like Jeff had mentioned. Basically, a simple way is go through the list of all of the skills, and those are the things that can have hit points. So one of the things that you can do, and it's really just kind of like seat of your pants design, see what works for your table. Start with a D6 and just go with a D6, and everyone has a D6, but then you can add your proficiency bonus in that skill to the attack. So if I'm rolling a nature check or survival rather, or like, you know, history, something like that, I can feel like my skill matters because when I roll my die, it's my D6. Oh, wow, check it out. I got 3, but I'm proficient, so I actually just did 5. So that's actually kind of a neat way if you really want to gamify things, just having everyone go around the table. And the cool thing is you can still narrate what you're doing like it was combat. It doesn't have to go straight rolls. It can be like, hey, I say this and I do this and I pull out this tome and I, you know, blow off the dust and I start reading this old story that I remember. And then you roll. What's cool about that is it's not a binary pass or fail. And that really fixes a lot of things in D&D for me. So it's not like, oh, you rolled a 12, so actually you don't know that thing, the end. Instead, it's, you only rolled a 1 damage. You're really having trouble finding that stuff in the book, so keep going. I really love that, and I actually, now the more and more I think about it, I'm like, I really want to incorporate that into a system I'm writing. Like, it's just really clean. So anyway, try that for D&D, and let us know what you come up with and how it works. All right, so we're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about creativity. We love having fun, and of course, tabletop games. If you like that sort of stuff, you should consider subscribing to the channel. And if you hit the notification bell, YouTube will let you know whenever videos like this go live. In the comments, put anything related to whether it's a story of your players trying to kill everything, or if you have players that don't ever want to get in fights, and how you overcame it or what you do to handle it, or anything else you want to talk about the topic or questions you'd like to ask. As per usual, let's end this video with a TabTerian Toast.
May you mend the first brick.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte. Rocking the perp for you, Jimmy.
So this is not going to be in the video, but I was laughing to myself at the fact that you you said this RPG that I'm writing with my daughter. So it made it sound like she was the co-writer of the 5-minute RPG.
That's hilarious.
That's just side, but now I'll actually do the
So
video.
I was gonna say that this should be the end card, because let me tell you the other story. I didn't even want to get into it, and I stopped myself. But it's not even really the 5-minute RPG. It is this base, not using the rules we decided or have even discussed, just a little roll-off game that is wrong for calling it the 5-minute RPG. So anyway, yeah, so there's your end card. So stay tuned for the real 5-minute RPG, not written by my daughter, but she'll probably get a playtesting credit. Nepotism.
There you go.